My name is Abby Grossman, and I'm speaking with Joseph Samuels on behalf of Holocaust Museum LA. It's September 10th, 2025, and we're located at Joe's house in Santa Monica, California. Assisting with the interview today is Michael Cannon and Eli Sussman. So, Joe, we'd love to just start off with what is your date of birth, where were you born, what was your name at birth, and if you changed your name later on.
Before I start describing my date of birth, I want first to express my deep appreciation and respect to the Holocaust Museum that they wanted to record the extent of the Holocaust that is rarely told or known. The Holocaust that not only in Europe but went into the Middle East and the Arab countries, especially in Iraq and North Africa. I was born in the old city, the Jewish quarter of the old city of Baghdad, a fairly poor neighborhood where streets are narrow, twisted, and unpaved. Sanitary condition was poor, non-existent, and to really survive is a miracle. My Arabic name when I was born was Yusuf, and I grew up, and I had a happy childhood in where I was. My whole life was about maybe half a mile or a mile's radius. I went to school. I went with my father to the synagogue. I went to all my cousins, my family, all were in the same neighborhood, to the bakery, to the sweet maker, all my life. And I thought that Baghdad is my home and Iraq is my country, you know. So I grew up there and began to, to live together. We were 13 of us living in a 3-bedroom house. 8 children, my parents, my grandmother, and a cousin and her daughter. As I said, the houses were attached from 3 sides, and everybody, my playground was on the streets there.
Amazing. Could you tell us a bit more about the nature of religious life in the spiritual community in
Yes. Our lives was centered about being Judaism. Although we were not deeply religious, but always centered about the festivals. For example, my happiest time is Passover, when I got new clothes. Because I was the 7th of the 8 children, I always have hand-me-down. But on Passover, my mother took me to the shoemakers to make a pair of shoes, shorts, shirts, but it's always that my shirt was about 2 sizes bigger. My shoes, my feet were swimming in my shoes. I looked like a clown, but I was so happy to have new clothes. So Shabbat, for example, was a major event in our family. My father used to go to the synagogue early in the morning, to the shops, and everything was cooked in the house. So we gathered on Shabbat. My father came back from the synagogue dressed up in white clothes, and we make the kiddush. We all kissed his hand, and we have a lovely festivals. And so that was in Purim, and every festival was really getting together with the family.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a bit about your siblings and the family dynamic?
Yes. My mother my father married my mother, he was 17. His father died in a plague when he was 13, so he quit school to try to support his two brothers and his widowed mother. And then he worked in a textile store, and from there he became a textile merchant. So we were 7 brothers and 1 sisters, and we had, each person had their own personality. I had my older brother that I adored, always with him in the bicycle, Eliyahu, that I loved most. Yeah, but each person have their own, and the whole family is centered about getting together on the festivals and on Shabbat.
What do you recall about your town and the relationships between Jews and non-Jews when you were growing up?
Okay, my father has a textile store, and he always praised the Muslim customers, and he said they are honorable, fearing God, they pay their bills. My older brothers had Muslim friends, so I did not see any tension when I grew up in the old city of Baghdad. I didn't felt any tension when I was young. But that all changed when a pro-Nazi coup in April of 1941 deposed the government, and the king fled with the government, and the whole our life completely changed. Daily newspapers started publishing articles about how the Jews are not patriot, not Arabs. They are, they are bloodsuckers. Radio Baghdad announced arrested Jews as spies. But that coup was basically instigated by the Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who escaped Palestine in 1936, and he was invited to Baghdad. And of course, the German ambassador Fritz Grobe financed the pro-Nazi coup. And this is very little known about what happened to the Holocaust time. And if I can just digress a minute to tell about 1941 June, the free world were really at the pit of the bottom. Hitler controlled or occupied all of Europe. His army under General Rommel occupied North Africa, and the coup in Iraq also was pro-Nazi, deposed the king. So, but we were fortunate because the British, the only country was stood up to Hitler was England, and even the British government were influenced to try to make a deal with Hitler, after all daily bombing in 1941. America was isolationist. They didn't want to get involved. Russia was on the side of Hitler. So it was the darkest time in the world history, but the British found that the importance of Iraq to them. So 2 months after the coup, they brought their army. They brought Indians and Nepalese. They arrived at the outskirts of Baghdad. And that was at the eve of Shavuot. It was May 31st of 1941. As they arrived outskirts of Baghdad, the coup leaders fled, and there was a vacuum. So the mob went into Jewish homes and businesses, looted and burned. The mobs, then they murdered men and children, they gang raped women and murdered them. And this was called the Farhud. There are a number of articles, a number of books written, but the best is the one that is written by Edwin Black, the Farhud. It goes back to the details of the what happened actually, the pogrom of the killing of the Jews in Baghdad in 1941. According to the official Iraqi government, only 179 Jews were murdered, but the reality is hundreds were murdered and raped, in Iraq and killed. There was no resistance. No Jews fought back. Then I heard stories that some Muslim men stood up in front of their Jewish friend's home and prevented the mobs from breaking into their homes. Some even took them to their home to protect them, But on the first day of the Farhud, my brother Eliyahu took the bicycle to visit his cousins. But when they arrived, my both uncles' homes were broken, everything was empty. Later we heard that only my aunt, jumping from one roof to another, broke a leg. But he rushed back to come to home, and he drove on the main street called Al-Rashid Street, and he saw how the mobs dragging Jewish passengers from the mini buses, we didn't have big buses, and robbed them, raped them, and murdered them. So he came home traumatized to us. So immediately we took heavy furniture and enforced our front door. I took, as a 10-year-old, I took water with oil up on the roof to boil, just in case the mob comes in, we could delay them. But from the time of the coup to the Farhud, I often, as a 10 years old, was terrified. I went home crying at night, crying myself to sleep. Then, fortunately, the British entered Baghdad. When they entered, they shot the mob and they quietened the right. And many, those who could afford to leave, they left Iraq, but most of us, we had nowhere to hide, nowhere to go. So when I heard the story of how Muslim protected Jews, I was confused. So I asked my father, what is happening? So he said, son, don't judge people by groups. There are good Muslims and bad Muslims. There are good Jews and bad Jews. There are good Christians and bad Christians. And that what lesson that stayed with me all my life. Yeah, so then the situation was quietened when the British came in.
If we could go back for just 1 second before the Farhud, do you have any specific experiences or memories of the days leading up and the early anti-Semitism that you experienced as a young child?
As I said, I really had a happy childhood. We lived in the Jewish neighborhood. I didn't have any personal experience as a child about anti-Semitism. But of course, the Farhud totally, reversed my life upside down to what's happening. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know why we're singled out. I didn't know why, what happened to us, you know. So,
Yeah. Do you remember any of the specific messaging or propaganda or policy changes that happened against Jews?
yes, of course. As I said, as the coup leader took over, it's totally changed. As the newspaper published all kind of, derogatory articles accusing Jews of, of being not nationals. That's what the policy. Radio Baghdad. It was not only sad but frightening time in my life as a 10 years old, and I didn't know why we are suddenly singled out.
And immediately following the Farhud, what was life like for you? You said you experienced a lot of fear and confusion. What was your day-to-day like?
Yeah, after the British came in, life became more normal. And then, of course, as the years go by, the World War changed when Hitler attacked Russia, and then America came into the scene, and after the attack on Pearl Harbor, situation became better. And so it was quiet in Iraq. We are fortunate. The British didn't really love the Jews, but they didn't hate it like the German, the Nazis. They didn't hate us, And my older brother, I have a 20 years older brother who never finished school, but he had a lot of common sense. So he knew how to bribe the officials to get permits to import textiles. And then he brought our family from poverty to wealth. We had a private car with a chauffeur. We moved to a villa to live there. Our financial situation totally changed. And I called him, he has a PhD in common sense. How he brought our family to wealth. Then what happened, it was quiet till 1947. 1947, a new eruption began after the United Nations approved the partition of Palestine on November 29, 1947. Demonstration erupted in Baghdad, and I was 17 years old, and I was in high school. All Jewish school closed. We demonstrated with them. We were afraid what would their reaction be, And we were predicting another second Farhud, but luckily it didn't happen. But the Jews in Syria, after the partition of Palestine, in Aleppo, the mobs went there, burned 4 synagogues, burned an orphanage, and killed about 75 people. We were praying as Jews in Iraq that the Palestinians will accept the partition and establish a new Arab country. There were 22 Arab countries, and we are praying that they will establish a new Palestinian country. But regretfully, the Arab League unanimously rejected and declared a jihad that went on later on again and created the war against Israel.
So you touched a bit on the political climate and your feeling after the Farhud, but how did it specifically impact your sense of identity, and as Iraq being your home, how did this shift change that in your mind?
Well, after the Farhud, I learned that this is not my home. This is not my country. So I studied hard, and I was excelled in science, and I wanted to be a nuclear physicist. And I graduated from high school in 1948, just after the war against Israel. And I applied, I got accepted in 3 universities here, including USC. But the Iraqi government refused to give me permission to leave Iraq, in Arabic called khuruj, or exit visa. You know, even if you have a visa to enter another country and a passport, they have to get a special permission. So I tried and I tried and I couldn't. Finally, a year later, I decided to throw away my dreams and decided to smuggle out of Iraq without any document and any paper, to smuggle from Iraq to Iran.
So when did you leave and how did you escape?
Okay. After the Arab countries of destruction of Israel, they turned against the Jewish community in Iraq. Summary arrest, torture, confessions, finally ended up with accusation of a major Jewish merchant who was very, very close to the king and the government. His name is Shafiq Adas, and he was accused of aiding Israel, and he was publicly hanged in September of 1948. When I saw his picture in the front page of Al-Zaman paper, the Times of Iraq, I was shivering, and I said, I'm going to get out. And then I decided to with my younger brother, to smuggle out of Iraq.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe the journey of how you got out? What steps did you take?
Yes, that was, terrible journey. I describe it in my book, how it was very difficult. We went by train from Baghdad to port city of Basra, and we arranged 2 Muslim smugglers on a tributary boat. The boat was about 30 feet long by 10, but it didn't have any motor. It moved by rowing and punting. So they have to wait with the tide of the Shatt al-Arab, the river, that will take us to Iran when the river split to Iran and Iraq. But unfortunately, after an hour, we stopped because the wind was against us and the tide was with us, but we couldn't move. So the boat got stuck in the tributary river for 24 hours till next day that the tide can take us. So we didn't have any food. The smuggler brought some bread and dates. We drank water from the river. We were about a dozen of us. There was one boy who was 13 years old, and he started to cry. I was appointed as a leader of the group on that trip. I felt like crying with him, but I said, no, I have to stoic. I said, go back, hide in the tributary boat that was covered by hay, as if the smuggler were carrying hay. And then the next day, when the tide was with us, we arrived and we crossed to Iran. That was the happiest time we ever felt. I must compliment the Iranian families that were so hospitable to us. They took us to their home, they fed us, we slept there. It was just as a relief there. So in there, you go to my younger brother went to Tehran, went to Israel, but I decided to stay 2 months in Iran to help other big smugglers. And after 2 months, I went by train to Tehran, and from Tehran, Israel arranged a flight which is held by Alaska Airlines. And they had a cargo plane that was converted to passenger. They put wooden benches. We didn't have seat belts. We didn't give us any food. But we have to fly all the way north to Turkey, then the ocean, then we arrived to Israel. And I arrived to Israel on March 2nd of 1950. And that was the happiest day in my life. I walked free, I spoke free, I slept free. And the first time I relished the word freedom, which it is impossible to describe to somebody who was born in freedom and knows what freedom is. But I was the happiest. Then I became a refugee. I went to the refugee camp. They took us, they sprayed us with DDT in case if we had any diseases or something. But I stayed very short time in the refugee camp, a couple of weeks. And from there, after 2 weeks, somebody suggested to go to a kibbutz. So I went to a kibbutz for 2 weeks, but I didn't like it either. You know, they put me as a shepherd. I went with the sheep. They didn't talk to me back. Then they put me in the grapevine and then in the barn. But I didn't like it. Then I went out and I found one job after another till I took a course in cutting stones to protect the houses in the front. But then after that I went to the Israeli army because I couldn't go into the university at that time. They needed young bodies to defend Israel. And I was appointed to the Navy in Haifa.
And what was your army experience like? And in general, did you experience any discrimination or isolation that you felt?
I personally really did not felt discrimination. You know, I knew I was a rebellious there. I didn't want to, to follow orders. But, and I served on a ship. From a ship, they put me on the land. And I spent my time in the garage fixing cars, and it was a good experience. And I must admit I'm grateful to the Israeli army because I grew up, as I said, as a teenager. I was really spoiled. We had so much money then, but the Israeli army taught me how to take care of other people, camaraderie, the importance of being together. So I matured after the Israeli experiences, that I had. And I'm grateful for that.
So during this time while you were in Israel, when did the rest of your family decide to leave Iraq, and where did they go? And what happened to Jews who didn't leave?
Okay. As I said, I smuggled out. After a year after I left, the Iraqi government created a law that any Jew can leave, but provided that he will go with one suitcase, lose his nationality, and all their assets. Now, 95% of the Jews of Iraq, which was at that time about 35% or 40% of Baghdad, registered to leave. My mother and my older brother went there. They stayed on the tarmac. Of course, they were robbed as they were leaving because the custom guy opened the suitcase, took anything they want. But anyway, most of them left. But my father and brother stayed there trying to salvage any of the textile that they have, the wealth. there. But after a short while, they decided to smuggle out. And they went to the north, to Kurdistan, and the Kurds helped them to cross to Iran, and then they came to Israel. And all of them came to Israel. But they said 95%, about 8,000 stayed in Iraq, and thinking that that's their home, their country, their language. They have a lot of friends in the government, only to find out slowly how their life completely was reversed. There was a coup d'etat in Iraq in 1958. They killed the king, they killed the regent and the prime minister. Then there was another coup in 63, the Ba'ath Party, and then it turned out hell against the Jews, of the remaining Jews, especially after 1967 war. So they cut their telephones, they arrested them, some of them took them and disappeared, but finally culminated by arresting 11 Jews, accusing them being spies for Israel, and they hanged 9, and they let one person free, as fair, you know. And I met the person that came. He came to Los Angeles. His name is Zangi, and the way he described the torture, I mean, you could cry and shake what they did, because they torture one till death in order to make them sign that they are spies. And then slowly those people left, smuggled out, and I think maybe there are about 3 or 4 people left in Iraq now.
What was it like to leave your family and say goodbye to them, and then what was the reunion like?
It was really sad, you know. As I said, that was my home. I grew up, my tongue, my mother language. I grew up with many friends, many family I had to leave. It was sad. But when we met in Israel, it was reunited. It was a hard time in Israel, but at least we saw each other. You know, and I stayed in Israel another 6 years, and I said maybe I could go to study again. So I applied to go to Argentina. I was refused. I applied for a visa to the United States. I was refused, but in Montreal they accepted me. So in 1956 I left Israel to go to Montreal to study.
Before we dive into Montreal, could you describe your life in Israel a bit post-army? What were you doing? Who were you with?
Yes. I was, you know, with my parents, with my father. I had, it was basically a hold-on life. I was applied where to go, how to find my future. But it was fairly nice, because being with my family there, it was a happy time with my parents, yeah.
Okay, so when you did go to Montreal, what were your hopes and expectations? And you said you were going for school,
Well,
so what was that?
my hope, my expectation is to continue to study. But that dream rapidly dissipated. You know, I was 26 years old, and I know now I had to work to make a living, you know, to try how I can support myself, where do I have the money to study. So I enrolled to study at night. I was tired to work during the day. Finally, I gave up my dream of being educated, and I said, I'll get married and I'll have my children, you know, get, you know, education. Yeah. So I gave up the dream of my studying, I couldn't find a job. I didn't have any special talent, any special profession or education. I was offered the job dishwashing or digging or manual labor or in a factory. But I said the only way I can achieve my dream is to have some money that I can do that. And I cannot make it by working for a salary. So I decided to go into real estate, selling real estate to an agency to start to work there.
And what were your first impressions of Montreal? The people, the culture, the weather? How did the people receive you? What was the Jewish community like?
It was nice. I didn't face any difficulty. The people were nice, but the weather is absolutely severe. In the winter, it's so cold, and it's hard. But I did not find any difficulty. The difficulty I found when I joined this real estate firm as a newcomer. I didn't know what it to take an offer, buy a house or something. So I was for the next 3 months I didn't make a penny. I didn't know how. But then I saw the cousin of the manager getting all the leads. If somebody wants to sell a house, wants somebody to list a house. So I went to him and I said, Marvin, you and I are going to be partners. So he laughed at me, you schmuck, you want to be my partner? I said, listen to my offer. Whatever I earn, I'll give you 50%. Whatever you earn, you keep 100%. So from there, I got a break. He gave me leads and I went to try selling, and slowly I was recognized. I am a good salesman. And from there I grew up.
Where did you meet your wife?
Yes. So 6 months after, we were invited at a wedding, and my wife came from England. She was born in India from Iraqi parents, and she went after the partition of India to England, and she came in 1956, and we met at a wedding, and they put us together. So I started, do you like to dance? She said, yes. Would you like to dance again? Yes. Can I take you home? Yes. Can I see you over the weekend? And that's how it started. And we didn't have any money. My best treatment to take my girlfriend for dinner was to have a hot dog for 10 cents and French fries for 5 cents. But we were happy. We didn't have any money. 2 years later, we saved the money. We got married and we bought a house.
So can you describe a bit more about the early days of building up your career, starting a family?
Yes. So when I got married, I already progressed in the real estate. I became a manager. Somebody offered me a partnership, but then I found this partner is not honest. So I split up and I started my own selling real estate firm in 1960, about 4.5 years after I came in. And in 2 years, I brought that firm to about 30 salesmen who were working for me. So I progressed quickly. Then from there, I found a partner, and we moved to building construction instead of just selling. And that's how I started accumulating more wealth. We built apartment buildings, and we did very well.
So what prompted your move from Montreal to the U.S., the political
Yes,
climate?
as I said, I had a beautiful life in Montreal. I had family and friends. In '74, I built a beautiful home, 4,500 square feet in the prime area of Montreal called Hampstead. But in '76, I was on a project to build a high-rise building, 21-story, 241 unit. When we finished it, it was in downtown Montreal. When we finished it, the Quebec, like a province, like a state, elected a government that wanted to separate from Canada. They wanted to establish a new country. So I was terrified. I didn't want to. And then I decided to sell the house and to move with my family to come to the United States. I had a lot of connection while I was in Canada with the United States. So we passed by, we saw a sign for rent this house here. We rented it. 6 months after the owner came, wanted to sell it, and we bought it. So I have been here since 1978, 47 years, and I'm so happy. You can see the garden here and a lovely home.
Yeah, it is a beautiful home. What was your experience like settling in the U.S. compared to Canada and the move over?
Yeah, I had very good experiences because I came with a lot of knowledge of construction, and I didn't find it very difficult. I found a better partner, and we bought some apartment in Beverly Hills, converted to condominium. We made it, and from there I bought other properties and tried to manage, and I made very well. And my dream of education was fulfilled. I have 3 children, 2 PhDs and 1 MD. They all are financially independent.
That's amazing. How do you feel that you navigated or still navigate your identity as an Iraqi Jew in America and preserve your cultural and traditional background?
Well, I mean, I belong to an Iraqi synagogue, but really, I describe myself as a Holocaust survivor and a former refugee. I don't feel I am refugee. I don't feel my children are refugees. You know, it was only part of my life. And I feel integrated as part of the country that I lived. Whether I was in Israel, I was Israeli. In Canada, I was a Canadian. And in America, I am American. I honor and respect, and I appreciate how they took us and we became part of the country as citizens.
Mm-hmm. How did surviving the Farhud and everything you went through shape the way you experienced life when you moved to North America?
Yes, of course. I always remember that tragedy, you know, and luckily I've never faced it again, and I really appreciate the freedom where we live, and I appreciate the hospitality of the country that they took us as to be part of the citizens. Mm-hmm. And I have 2 of my daughters lives here, close by, and 2 of my grandkids. I have 5 grandkids, and in a couple of weeks I expect my first great grandchild, and I'm thrilled to be alive to see that. Mm-hmm. And now at 94, and every day is a great gift to be alive and to be talking to, you know, with the family, and I appreciate, you know, your efforts here to interview me.
Well, we're very grateful for the opportunity to interview you, so it's really our honor. I just wanted to ask, are there any specific values or lessons, something that you pass down to your children and great-grandchildren that kind of stand out from your experiences and everything you've been through?
Yes, very good questions. I've learned the great lessons from my life. Mm-hmm. And I didn't talk with my family and my children for 5 decades about the trauma that I faced in Iraq. But in 2007, I took classes in memoir writing. And when I wrote about my first escape, I was crying. Then I felt free to talk. And I continued to writing. And in 2020, I published my memoir, Beyond the Rivers of Babylon. I published it in Beyond the Rivers of Babylon. And in 2021, I wrote an article about the 80th anniversary of the Farhud and sent it to the newspaper, and it was published in the Wall Street Journal. And last year I completed the translation of my book to Arabic, and it was published in Iraq. وداعا لبلاد الرافدين in Arabic. So whenever I am invited, I leave a message to the younger generation. I said, I can't tell you how to lead your life, but I can tell you my experiences. Life is not easy. It's quite difficult. We all face broken dreams, and if you have to learn to face it and to build new dreams. We all face disappointments. You have to learn from it. And whenever we do something, we may fail. So failure is only a stepping stone to success. So look up to the future and lead a life that will be an exciting journey through life. Like I did, I feel fulfilled life that I did.
That's beautiful. I just have one more question. You are mentioning now things that you want to leave for the younger generation and lessons, and I'm wondering, is there anything that, you mentioned you feel like the Iraqi history or kind of the journey and story of Jews from Arab lands has often been overshadowed. Is there anything specific that you want people to understand about
Yes. I am very, very appreciative and proud that at least the Holocaust Museum, I'm invited to the Museum of Tolerance to tell the story, because this is least known about what happened to the Holocaust beyond Europe. It's very not known, even among the Jews. They wanted to cover it in Israel. And the Israeli government in 2014 declared November 30th as the for the Jews of the Arab land, So it's really rarely told, and I appreciate any attempt to try to let our story known that we suffer too. Of course, I can't compare our suffering to our brothers in Europe of what happened to them, but we had our own suffering. And during the occupation in North Africa, the German deported many of the Jews from North Africa to Europe, but then after the war, after the Arab-Israeli war, there was nearly 1 million Jews in Iraq and in the Middle East and Iran before 1948. And now there's maybe 1% left, maybe about 10,000, left. So our story is overshadowed by the Palestinian refugees, because you don't know about the million Jews, because we are not refugees. We don't identify ourselves as refugees. We don't want our children to identify themselves. So our story remain untold, and anything to make known for the younger generation to learn of how to face life and to carry on with the life the way it happens.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a few individual questions as well for you, Joe. I've heard you talk about in the past how when you were younger and so many people from your generation maybe don't have the courage to share their stories. Specifically, I know in your book you talk about some of your own shortcomings and some of your failures in life. And so I'm curious if you wanted to speak a little bit about why you think you see that differently. Why do you feel so comfortable, or why do you think it's important even to talk about the places
Yeah.
where we failed?
Many of those who suffered like me, they want to bury it. They don't want to talk about it. But it's important for the new generation to learn about it, to face reality of life, you know, and to how to face it and to succeed in life, to have an exciting journey, you know. By the way, before I close, I mentioned in the when we smuggled out, there was a 13 years old boy, a child in the boat. So when I started talking in our synagogue about how we smuggled and faced, somebody came in from our synagogue and said, I am the 13 years old child that I was with you. I knew him there for years, but I didn't know that he was. It's an amazing small world, you know, that came in. So this is my story in brief, and I'm happy to share it with anyone.
If I could ask you just two more questions.
Yes, please.
One, how is your Jewish identity different to you depending on where you lived? So in Baghdad, if you want to talk on that, but specifically, how is your Jewish identity different when you were living in Israel versus when you were living here in North America in both Canada and
Yes.
the US?
Well, in Baghdad, we were really very, very important to be in a Jewish community together. You know, it was like to identify with each other. So we were very close practicing. When I was in Israel, I lost that importance. I became Israeli. I didn't practice. Then when I came to Montreal, I realized if I don't teach my kids about Judaism and Hebrew, they won't know. So I sent my kids to Hebrew school, and they all are fluent in Hebrew and Hebrew schools. And then when we came here to the US, each one drifted to their own way. But I still feel connected, as my Judaism that I learned has really gave me a good feeling about life. That the values, be generous, be kind, not only, struggle to try to be in the business world, but be kind, generous. And that's the important lesson that I taught to my kids. They're all not only educated, but they're financially well, and they're all participating in different charitable organizations. Yeah.
And I know you already spoke to this a little bit, but do you remember from your time in Baghdad growing up any specific holidays that, I know you talked about Passover being a really special time. Do you remember any other holidays? And specifically, I've heard you talk about some of your favorite Iraqi dishes and foods.
Yeah.
If you want to speak on that.
Yeah, sure. I love all the festival, including Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, we had all kind of plates. We have the special dates comes from the desert. We make the brachot and getting together, remembering that we are coming to a new year. And remembering that we have the 10 days of awe. Rosh Hashanah is not like any New Year, time for drinking and dancing, but really reflection on our actions and deeds and how we become a better person. See if we have hurt somebody, to apologize, or we have learned to do better. and to help our community. You know, of course, we have the 10 days of between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur is a day of atonement to think about our lives, you know, to improve. But I love also the Sukkot. The Sukkot is a nice festival. We celebrated. I remember in Baghdad it was a big thing. We put a big sukkah in the house. All the family used to come. I was young kids. They light the candles. We played till we knocked down that night. We were tired and we went to sleep. The Sukkot. Purim was a lovely time also. You know, all these festivals really identify us that we are together. You know, in Purim we got some money to play. We got gifts from one to another. We sent sweets from one house to another. It was lovely. So I'm happy to be part of the Jewish community, and if I could contribute anything, I am delighted.
And then, are there any specific foods or dishes that you remember your family making?
Yes, of course. Don't start me on that. Yeah, of course, the main dishes in Iraq was the rice with the kebabs, with the pieces of meat. But the best was what is called tibit. The tibit is they cook it Friday during the day on a stove, and stuffed chicken with spices, giblets. It was the most delicious, and it stayed on fire, the wooden fire, till the next day on Shabbat. So on Shabbat we wake up and we go to the synagogue, we come back, we have the smell of the tibit, you know, and that was one of my favorite dishes. Yeah. Also, of course, on Shabbat, my mother cooked a lot of beautiful dishes with rice, with raisins and apricot and chicken rice. It was lovely. Food was a center focal with the family, you know, we eat. But you see, in Baghdad it was hot. So my father and my older brother, they come home about 2 o'clock, they eat, and they have a siesta. They sleep, and at night, it was so hot, the most popular meal in the summer was watermelon and feta cheese. Yeah, so this is what we ate. But we have lovely dishes, unbelievable. It's a completely contrast. When I arrived to Israel at the refugee camp, they gave us herring. I never tasted herring in my life. They gave us salami. I didn't know what salami is. We had all these fresh meats and delicious foods in Baghdad. But that was foregone for the freedom I experienced. You know, from there it was a beautiful life I led.
Were there any traditional meals that you had on Rosh Hashanah? Do you remember?
Traditional meal, we had, of course, the chicken rice was traditional on Rosh Hashanah. Usually we have the chicken soup and we have different traditions. Yeah. But since I left, we have different foods. We got adjusted to different style of food, and it was a secondary, not so that important, you know. As you know, we learned living in Israel, Canada, and here to adapt to the food, the local food. So the food was not the most important in our lives. Yeah.
I think I recall you talking about this once. Growing up, did you ever play soccer or any other sports?
I didn't play soccer, but I played marble when I was a kid. I was a good player marble player. In fact, I have a friend of mine always he talked to me, he said, at 94, you still have your marbles. So I said, because I was a good marble player, you know. So I keep my mind sharp, you know, by studying and learning continuously. I use the computer also. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have one more question. You may have touched on it earlier, but
Yes.
if you could explain what Farhud means in Arabic and why that was the name that.
Yes. Farhud is an Arabic word mean violent disposition. But it's really in Arabic, in Hebrew, the best described tohu wa bohu. Everybody is free to do whatever they want. There's no morality, there's no, yeah. So that was the name Farhud that stuck about this pogrom that went, that the Jewish community suffered. There were other, of course, in North Africa, there were fears, but this word Farhud is stuck to that pogrom in 1941 of the Iraqi Jews, when the mobs came in and for 2 days looted, murdered, killed, rapes, you know.
Were there any events over the years from 1941 until today that reminded you of what you went through in the Farhud?
Not really. After the 4th, I didn't face any major difficulty that reminded me of the Farhud. You know, I faced the trauma, but I was able to release myself after I wrote my book, and when I speak about it, I speak about it freely. You know, many of the Jews that faced it were not free to talk. They wanted to bury it. They don't want to talk about it. But I felt free after attending the memoir class and writing and finishing my books. So I feel free to talk about it without any, that pain. Of course, on October 7th of what happened really ignited that trauma of when Hamas attacked Israel. It really reignited that pain and trauma of the Farhud, of how those Arabs, they come in and kill and murder, you know. But then it affected me. I couldn't sleep at night. I cried, but I find, what if I am not able to think straight, how can I help? You know, so I said, this is part of history. I leave it to the Israeli government to defend themselves, and I pray for them all the time.
More questions just keep coming up the more you talk. In 1941, Jews throughout Europe and the Middle East, you talk so much about freedom, and in 1941, Jews throughout the Middle East and Europe were not free, including you and your family. If you could go back and tell yourself in 1941 what your life was like today, what would you tell yourself back then? Knowing what your life would become and what your children's lives would become here in America.
What can I say today in 1940, as a child in 1941, 10 years old, I didn't know what was happening, why we were singled out, why they're attacking us, what did we do wrong. So to speak to somebody, I said, watch out of what you say, what you hear, the accusation, and always stand up. Don't accept anything they say to you, but stand up and show that you are a decent citizens and part of the country, and you want the best for everybody.
I'm gonna ask you just one final question.
Yes, please.
What is the first thing you think of when you wake up in the morning, and what's the last thing you think about before you go to bed?
Oh, my goodness. The first thing I think, I'm grateful to God that I am still alive and at this age, you know, that I can still walk and talk. Of course, I have suffered, you know, in the last few months, health issues, major surgery, but I'm grateful to wake up and you know, be able to move. And when I go at night, I said, thank you, God, for the moment, for the hour, for the day you bestowed on me. So I'm grateful to be where I am now. You know, at that age, there's no certainty when I'll be called to the second, to leave this world. But in the meantime, I'm happy, you know, since after the hospitalization, I got a hospital bed. I sleep here, and you know, and I have a home care that she's here 24 hours a day. So I'm grateful.
Oh, yes. Okay, I guess we do have more questions then. I've heard you speak about your garden, and I know that you have a lot of pride in your garden.
Yes.
If you want to just tell us a little bit about, in practicality, how your garden operates and what it is.
Well,
and also if you wanted to talk a little about...
I've found that life without hobby is empty. I mean, you could concentrate on your work, concentrate what you do, but we all need a hobby. And my number one hobby was traveling. When I was younger, I traveled to over 100 countries and lived in 4, you know, on all the 6 continents. But when I moved to here to Los Angeles, I turned the garden into all fruit gardens. So I have over 30 fruit trees in my backyard. And I used to go there I said to my wife, I'm there for 5 minutes, 2 hours later, I said, what happened to you? That you absorbed the hobby of the gardening. I like the gardening because you're dealing with life, you know, birth, you know, growth, difficulties, diseases, you know, you have to really take care of the tree, trim, feed, adjust. So it's a hobby of life. And I think we should all have some hobby to take us from the seriousness of life, of what we are doing.
Thank you for that answer. It's such a beautiful garden. One more question. For survivors of the massacre on October 7th that you mentioned, maybe for anyone who may have difficulty, some challenges healing from that, what advice would you give them as a survivor of the Farhud?
I mean, what can I say? I mean, it's difficult, you know, to face that October 7th, the brutal, but that's a sample of what would they do, you know. They claim that they are refugees, they want to go home. It's all, they are one idea, is to eliminate the state of Israel. And that's the problem. And Israel have to be always strong, defend itself, and I think we have to survive that way, always to stand up to this, you know, I mean, I know there are some people, they face trauma, and I know somebody specialized in the trauma. It's not easy. I mean, thank God. I know I have a nephew in Israel. He lives in Jerusalem. He's my father's son, my brother's son. But he's from the mother's side. All their the family were killed in the kibbutz when they were attacked. They all were killed. So I can only sympathize with them. I cannot. What can I? It's not easy. It's hard, but we have to carry on. We have to push on. We have to survive, and we must survive, and we will survive. And Israel will survive. Amen.
On that note, thank you so much, Joe, for being here with us and for sharing your story. I thank you on behalf of Holocaust Museum LA.
Thank you so much for taking the time, and I appreciate it. And I hope some future generation can see and learn about few things in life, how to face it and to progress in life. Thank you again, each and every one of you, for taking the time.